Republic of Armenia will work with the United States of America and mutually agreed third parties to define the framework for the implementation of the Trump Path for International Peace and Prosperity communication project in the territory of the Republic of Armenia. We affirm our determination to take all measures in good faith to achieve this goal as quickly as possible. End of quote. The TRIP program is currently in the crystallization phase. On January 13, the US and the Armenian governments adopted the TRIP implementation framework. In the near future, Armenia and the United States will sign the relevant agreements, and the practical implementation of the project will begin. This project, which stems from the Armenian government's Crossroads of Peace project, will create new transportation opportunities from east to west and vice versa, from south to north and vice versa. This is also a historic change. It must be emphasized that I first spoke about the Crossroads of Peace project on October 17, 2023, at this podium in the European Parliament, and the developments above unleash new opportunities for the European Union and Armenia in terms of deepening cooperation in the field of transportation and making it more specific. Honorable President of the European Parliament, honorable members, the positive picture I presented is certainly overshadowed by the events that are happening next door to us in the Islamic Republic of Iran and in a number of Middle Eastern countries. Iran is our good friend, our 1,000-year-old neighbor. You have already seen the scope of our relationship with the United States. The UAE, Qatar, Oman, Kuwait, Jordan, Lebanon, Bahrain, Syria are our good partners. We recently took a historic step with Saudi Arabia. We established diplomatic relations. We are pained by what is happening in the Middle East. Against the backdrop of such an international crisis, a crisis of this scale, we are a small, humble state. All we can do is pray for the souls of all the victims and for the wisdom of our partner leaders to find diplomatic solutions as soon as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable President, dear members of the Parliament, for 8 months now, there is complete peace on the Armenia-Azerbaijan border. 2025 became the first year since our independence in 1991, the first year when Armenia-Azerbaijan shootings did not cause, or there were no casualties, no injuries due to Armenia-Azerbaijan shootings. For months now, residents living near the border have not heard the sounds of gunfire. Moreover, for the first time since independence in November 2025, a train passed through Azerbaijan, passed through Georgia, and reached the Republic of Armenia. I repeat, this is the first time since 1991. This happened after the president of Azerbaijan declared in October 2025 that he would lift the restrictions on rail transportation via Azerbaijan to Armenia, and I am grateful to the president of Azerbaijan for such a decision. We in turn announced that we are ready from today to ensure transit from Azerbaijan to Turkey and vice versa, because this is something we can do with our existing road network. Neither Azerbaijan nor Turkey have taken advantage of this opportunity yet. I suppose one of the reasons is they think that such a solution might delay the implementation of the TRIP project. I officially declare from this podium that Armenia has no intention and no reason to delay the implementation of the TRIP project, because the project fully corresponds to the short-term, medium-term, and long-term interests of the Republic of Armenia. And as you saw from the aforementioned quotes, in no way does it undermine the sovereignty, territorial integrity, or jurisdiction of the Republic of Armenia. Now, I also wish to say that the Republic of Armenia is ready from today to provide a road connection with the existing infrastructures via Kornizor, Goris, Yeregnadzor, Yeraskh, between the western regions of Azerbaijan and the Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic. This proposal is not intended in any way to delay, disrupt, or forget the Washington agreements, and I am saying this officially. We are making this proposal because we, as I mentioned above, are using the Azerbaijani railway in a slightly alternative way. Just as Azerbaijan is waiting for the establishment of a connection via Armenia to the Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic, so are we waiting for the establishment of a railway connection between the south and north of Armenia via the territory of Nakhchivan. This railway has no alternative for Armenia. The mountainous terrain of Armenia does not allow for a railway connection between the south and north of the country in any other way. As you can see, the expectations of Armenia and Azerbaijan in this sense do not contradict one another. We are also going to use the Georgia-Azerbaijan railway for exports. I hope that in the near future, Azerbaijan will also become an export destination for Armenia. And Armenia is already importing oil produce from Azerbaijan, which led to a decline in oil produce prices in our market and broke the decades-long monopolies in the oil produce market. I would also like to thank the Prime Minister of Georgia for supporting the railway communication between Armenia and Azerbaijan and the peace process more broadly. Ladies and gentlemen, especially on international platforms, people often ask me why did peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan become possible in 2025, while it was not possible before? What is the reason? What changed after all? Firstly, of course, the personal involvement and the initiative of U.S. President Donald Trump was essential. It was a turning point. The second factor that made peace possible was the realization that at least in the last 100 years of history, Armenia and Azerbaijan have been interconnected. In 1918, Armenia and Azerbaijan gained independence on the exact same day. 2 years later, in 1920, the two countries lost independence with a difference of months. In 1991, Armenia and Azerbaijan gained independence within months of each other, or basically even on the same day when the Alma-Ata Declaration documented the end of the Soviet Union. The Armenian-Azerbaijani clashes in 1920 were a key factor that prevented the two countries from maintaining and strengthening their independence. Now, a century later, we live in a region that is just as complex and geopolitical turmoil as in the beginning of the 20th century now will not spare us unless we take care of ourselves, because conflict and hostility are the virus that blinds us, makes our independence and statehood vulnerable, makes us a tempting target for deadly geopolitical diseases. And so the realization of the strategic interdependence of our destinies is another essential factor that made peace possible between Armenia and Azerbaijan. In order not to leave room for ambiguity, I would like to emphasize that this is my personal opinion, and it is my personal conviction that in March, April 2024, we had reached the edge, the brink of Armenian statehood. And if in April 24 we had not made a decision to launch the demarcation process with Azerbaijan, the Republic of Armenia would not be an independent state today. It would be, as a minimum, a territory under foreign rule. Taking that demarcation decision in April 24 was very difficult. With the encouragement of the de facto chief of our church, one of the archbishops in Armenia had started a movement demanding not only to not carry out the demarcation, but also to essentially activate the Karabakh movement, in other words, the conflict. Dozens of thousands of citizens succumbing to this disinformation campaign carried out by high-ranking clergymen and their supporting opposition forces, who claimed that the government was preparing to cede sovereign territories of Armenia and the ancient churches and settlements located there to Azerbaijan, took to the streets. You can imagine what this meant for our government and for our political team, which came to power in 2018 as a result of the People's Non-Violent Velvet Revolution. And how did we solve this problem? We talked to our employer, the people, and now the village of Kirans in the Tavush region, which leaders of the church opposition movement had made their symbol, convincing people that the village would be emptied and abandoned. Since 2024, since demarcation, that village has seen a 50% increase in the number of houses with the support of the government. Today, it is an absolutely peaceful, safe, and colorful settlement. And the ancient churches there are being restored or renovated. I personally organize visits and tours for groups of citizens to the village of Kirans in the Tavush region to show people what we mean when we say peace, what I mean when I say real Armenia, the symbol of which, the image of the internationally recognized territory of the Republic of Armenia, I carry on my chest. This is also a symbol of peace, because we established peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan by recognizing each other's territorial integrity, sovereignty, and political independence on the basis of the 1991, December 21, Alma-Ata Declaration, according to which Soviet Azerbaijan became independent Azerbaijan, Soviet Armenia became independent Armenia. And this is the outline of the map of the territory of independent Armenia. I would not have touched upon the topic of the involvement of certain clergy in this process against peace had I not seen how the emissaries of these clergy and representatives of certain lobbyist organizations affiliated with them are trying to spread in the European Parliament and other reputable international structures the message that the Armenian government is restricting freedom of conscience, that Armenia is establishing a dictatorship, or Armenia has political prisoners. The reality is that certain clergymen who cynically violated all the rules of spiritual decency, thus making themselves vulnerable to foreign special services. The fact that some of them were agents of the USSR's State Security Committee is proven by documents. Those clergymen assumed the leadership of the war party in the Republic of Armenia, gathering around them the former leaders of Armenia, certain forces associated with them, some Russia residents and pro-Belarusian oligarchs, and are trying to sacrifice Armenia's independence to the interests of third countries. We will not allow a new conflict or a new war. We will not allow the conscience, peace, and independence achieved at the cost of thousands of victims to be sacrificed for anti-Christian purposes. In the text of our liturgy of the Armenian Apostolic Holy Church, the word peace is mentioned more than 40 times. And it is not only about the person or the soul, but also about world peace, about which there are dozens of pleas in the canonical text of our liturgy from our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And today, some are using the altar of Christ to preach conflict, war, and/or domestic violence within Armenia, crossing the lines of the legislation of Armenia. This cannot be tolerated in any democratic country. Honorable President of the European Parliament, distinguished members, ladies and gentlemen, one of our important tasks is also to ensure that the emotions of our sisters and brothers from Karabakh who became refugees are not exploited by giving them false hopes. Our strategy in this regard is very clear. Our sisters and brothers from Karabakh should receive citizenship of the Republic of Armenia and permanently settle in the Republic of Armenia. We have already launched their housing program, which has benefited 4,886 families. We need the greatest possible support from our international partners to resolve this issue with a focus on strengthening peace. Ladies and gentlemen, we are criticized that the peace established between Armenia and Azerbaijan is not perfect. Tell me, please, where is peace perfect? Where is there perfect peace? Where was it? When? And on the contrary, it is the will to care for peace that can make it as close to perfect as possible. And this is how we approach all the issues, including the issue of our compatriots held in prison in Azerbaijan. Recently, Azerbaijan released 4 more of our compatriots. Armenian society, we all experienced happiness on that occasion, but the government very quickly returned to continuing its silent diplomatic work for the sake of the return of the others, because I am convinced that if we had not previously chosen the style of silent diplomatic work, the return of our 4 compatriots on January 14 would not have taken place. Honorable President of the European Parliament, distinguished members, ladies and gentlemen, the next incredible change that took place in Armenia since my previous speech is that in March 2025, Armenia adopted a law on launching the process of Armenia's accession to the European Union, and the law entered into force in April 2025. This is the political crystallization of the statement that I made in this House on October 17, 2023, when I said that the Republic of Armenia stands ready to be closer to the European Union, to be as close as the European Union considers possible. Now, after the adoption of that law, many people in Armenia ask when Armenia will become a member of the European Union. Our answer is very clear. No country can become a member state of the EU without meeting the standards of the European Union. Therefore, our task is to continue the path of reforms with the support of our European partners, and first of all, to objectively meet the EU membership criteria. When this happens, there are 2 ways. Either the EU will accept us as a fully fledged member, or it will not. And I say this because I understand that EU enlargement, the accession of a new member, is not a simple matter. It is also a matter of political decisions. Therefore, if the EU accepts Armenia as a full member, it will be great. If it doesn't, then we will still benefit, because we will be a country that has fully complied with the EU standards. However, I should say frankly that the biggest problem on Armenia's EU integration path at the moment is the frozen state of the political dialogue between the EU and Georgia. Georgia is for us a path to the European Union, and we adopted the law on launching the process of Armenia's EU accession after Georgia was granted candidate status for European Union membership. It made Armenia's EU membership prospect tangible, and we expect and we request that the constructive process between the European Union and Georgia develop. This is important for Armenia. It is just as important as for Georgia. Honorable President of the European Parliament, distinguished members, ladies and gentlemen, the people's non-violent Velvet Revolution that took place in Armenia in 2018 was based on the understandings of freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. We kept our democracy viable and developing in spite of the war even. But we understood that peace is the only way to make democracy irreversible. In reality, we achieved peace thanks to democracy, thanks to our commitment to democratic values, because we were able to overcome the patterns of thinking that were imposed on Armenia. We overcame by listening to the people, the real people, the living people who were longing for life and peace. On June 7, 2026, the next parliamentary election will be held in the Republic of Armenia, and with those elections, our democracy must make peace irreversible. And then, with peace, democracy will become irreversible. We are on this path moving forward, and I say this as a legitimate representative of the people of the Republic of Armenia. And so, long live peace, long live democracy. Thank you for your attention.